They did not have a name for the sickness. They only knew it was a long death, the lungs and heart bleeding from the inside out, so they prayed to God. The doctor came with a morning fog, a big mask piercing through the air. Even indirectly, God always answers his flock eventually. The doctor examined a few victims, performing secret dissections and only allowing village leaders to receive an explanation. He ordered the villagers to stay inside, not leave the border, and to report any and all odd symptoms directly to him. "What plague has cursed us?" one elder asked, a rare moment of courage from the otherwise quiet leaders. "Not a plague you would have knowledge of," the doctor replied unhelpfully. "'Tis an illness of the soul. The village has sinned, and the plague is a virtuous punishment." "What must we do to meet this end?" one leader asked. "What hath we done to deserve this fate?" The doctor looked at them. His hands were covered in crimson blood. "There is a cure, but I do not believe thou hast the stomach to achieve the salvation you desire. Tell us, sire, we beg." So he did. The leaders announced their solution to the village. 3 children must be given to the Lord, so that he might spare the rest of the village. They wished to do a lottery, but the doctor insisted that they must choose. This must be a sacrifice, owned by all, not merely an unfortunate chance by fate. Each villager was able to cast 1 vote. Families often voted for other children they disliked. The doctor saw this and smiled. He took the children with him to visit a sick elder. He claimed they could pray together with her, and she would die knowing her village would be saved because of the bravery their youth had. As she smiled, the doctor rushed forward with a dagger, slashing her chest open. Disbelief reflected in her eyes, and the children screamed. He reached inside her chest, finding the big mask he had been looking for. He pulled it out, then turned to face the children that were offered for a cure. "One of you shall be enough worth to don this mask, as I had years before," he proclaimed, wiping the blood and viscera off. "It will reject the other 2, as it did years before." The doctor forced the mask on. The first child burst into flames, dropping to the floor. The second child wore it with no ill effect, and the doctor knew he had found another. The doctor left with his next apprentice. They left the village behind, leaving them to succumb to the illness before the fog rolled in with the next moon. "Where shall we go now?" the child asked, her voice calm and stoic under the mask, the change already occurring. "We find others," he answered. "Our time will come to fight the horseman pestilence." They vanished into the fog. My teeth were itchy. It was a subtle thing at first, just a little irritation here and there, but it grew from there. I'd run my fingers along the teeth, all of them, by that time throbbing with pain, throbbing with itchiness. I'd run my tongue along them, pushing against them in a desperate attempt to quench the itch, but it remained. I continued to do that for a week or so, brushing my teeth with the hardest bristled toothbrush numerous times a day, again and again and again until my gums bled and all I tasted was blood. But it remained. I wondered to myself often what was wrong with my teeth, what was plaguing me so. A little maggot inside each hollow tooth, I decided, writhing and itching until it was to emerge. When would this white creature emerge? Would it bring its rot with it? Or would my teeth be broken, jagged eggs, still rotting from within, still itching despite the culprit having disappeared? So I took initiative. Just 1 tooth at first, just an experiment. I took my nail clippers, sanitized and pristine, and set them up against the tooth. It wasn't up front, so people wouldn't be able to see what I'd done, but in the back, hidden, and I clamped. There was a breaking sound, but in that moment I felt no pain. All I felt was relief, absolute relief. No more itching, just euphoria. Pure, unfiltered euphoria. Then, the blood began gushing out. It tasted rotten, not like how metallic blood should taste. I began spitting the blood out, the image of the maggot clear in my head. The blood looked normal, but I knew it wasn't. It tasted wrong, it was wrong in my tooth. The blood in my gums hadn't tasted like this. There was nothing inside to reveal why my blood tasted like that. As I spit the blood out, a new thing replaced the relief. Itchiness. But this one hurt unlike the others. Where the surrounding teeth throbbed with itchiness that came and went in waves, this hurt in a steady stream of itchiness so intense that it was painful. I managed to leave it for a day. During that day, all that was in my mind was the image of the rot spreading to my gums. There was a clear difference in blood, and it had spread throughout my teeth. What was stopping it from spreading? Or rather, what could stop it? So, at 9 p.m. last night, I pulled out that broken tooth, yanked it. It came cleanly out, and with it, the pain. Blood gushed from my gums, but it was the blood of a first lost tooth, metallic and clean. I waited an hour, but the itchiness didn't return. By midnight, all the teeth were gone. By morning, the itchiness had returned. Just, this time, in my jaw. After I defeated their mortal enemy, they wanted to bestow me with one of the highest honors anyone could receive. They told me that they hadn't offered anyone else this prestigious honor because all the others who had attempted to take their enemy down perished in the path to do so. I was such a naive and innocent warrior at the time that I took it without thinking of the cons that would accompany this gift. All I was thinking was that it would alleviate the stress I know every other person around me would have to deal with. If only I had known just how wrong I would be. Even though I would never experience my final moments, it never meant I wouldn't suffer from the things that should kill you outright. So many different diseases plagued my body, some of which had no cure. So even though it wouldn't end my life, it would also never escape my life. My body had been in pain for so many centuries, but the pain will never go away until a cure had been discovered. It's not just physical pain that affects me. I have seen thousands of people I cared about over the centuries pass on to what lies behind death's door. I can't love anyone anymore, because no one will ever outlive and bury me. I just want it all to end, and believe me when I say, I have tried. Every fall, every wound, it will never be enough to end me. Please believe me when I say that wanting to live forever is not something you want. It might sound amazing, but living forever doesn't mean you are immune to what it's meant to kill you. Don't be as naive as me, because living forever might be the worst mistake anyone could make. Every time I came back from summer break, I was always eager to see all the children's faces. Today was no exception. I walked into the classroom and closed the door behind me. The kids were always thrilled to see me. The room was filled with chatter and giggles by all the excited children ready to start a new school year. Sarah, who was only 8 years old, sat in the front of class. Her cheeks were red, and her pigtail swung back and forth as she waved enthusiastically at me. Jason, with his eyes beaming with joy, called out to me, asking if I had a good summer. He too was so excited to start this new year. I quickly asked the class to simmer down their conversations as I began to answer Jason's question. My summer had been hectic, but I am sure glad to see all of your smiling faces. The kids smiled with that response. I slowly made my way to the desk and pulled out a box of matches from the drawer. I really missed all of you, I sighed under my breath. The kids then exchanged worried looks with each other as they watched my friendly demeanor change. "Mr. Anderson?" Jason sounded concerned. I glanced back up at them. I was surprised that they didn't question the gasoline smell when they came in. "Oh well, Mr. Anderson, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice was sweet, yet I could hear the fear behind it. The kids squirmed in their seats uncomfortably as I attempted to light the first match. "I'm scared, Mr. Anderson." "I know. I'm sorry." With another flick, the match set ablaze. In one quick motion, I threw the match towards them. The flames roared as they emerged. I hurried out the door, locking it behind me. The children began to scream and panic. One by one, I watched as their skins began to boil and melt away, revealing insect-like parts underneath. The children's squeals were then replaced by distorted screeching that echoed throughout the room. It started just a few months ago. We had a meteor shower that plagued the Earth with alien-like parasites. These parasites would attach themselves to their host and take control of them, devouring them slowly from the inside out. It was nearly impossible to detect them among people, but there was always a big giveaway. You see, the parasites started targeting a specific age group when they noticed adults found it difficult to kill them in that form. Just a few months ago, I was a regular elementary school teacher that loved all of my kids. Now, it's my job to take care of them. At first, it was fun seeing people stricken by the dancing plague. They dropped everything they were holding, stopped everything they were doing to dance. I was at the supermarket when it happened, so it was harmless enough. It affected around 1/3 of the people in there, not me. As soon as I headed outside, I realized it wasn't as funny as it had seemed, when multiple cars had crashed because their drivers absolutely needed to get up and dance. Moving through the streets became a hard task, not only because of the crashed vehicles and the risk of being crushed by a ton of metal someone suddenly left unattended, but also because the myriad of dancers compulsively moving to some inaudible yet contagious beat. They sometimes trampled each other, and soon the streets were chaos. The dancing was deranged, their tempo was oddly synchronized, but each person danced in a different manner, all of them thrusting their limbs and head with such intensity it might fall off. I shoved my way through them, and I was very happy when I safely made it back home, but my house was far from a safe haven. I lived in the suburbs with my grandmother and teenage brother. The latter was sobbing on the couch when I arrived. "Oh, thank God!" he exclaimed and hugged me, a very unusual behavior. We get along well, but, not that well. "What's the matter, Art?" "Grandma wouldn't stop dancing. I locked her in your office, sorry. She was dancing around the whole house like a crazy puppet and I felt overwhelmed." 1/3 of the people. "I guess I'll go check on her," I replied. "Don't. Something else happened." After hearing a loud thump, Arthur figured that our grandma fell. So he went to the office and checked on her. She couldn't get up, but her collapsed body was still gracelessly jerking to some rhythm that was imperceptible to his ears, and her eyes showed madness. She beat him when he tried to help her get up. "She beat you?" I confirmed, surprised. He nodded and showed me an ugly, blackened wound. "Holy fuck, her mouth has some strange bacteria. I'll see what I can do," I replied. "Are you listening to this beat?" My brother started to space out, looking around to see where it was coming from. "It's the best thing I've ever heard." His arms started tweaking, first lightly, then intently. For a couple of minutes his eyes were distant and glassy, and he danced with certain dignity, like a raver on a good trip. Then, something kind of obsessive possessed his face, and just like the dancers in the street, he started jolting his body with all of his strength, knocking down objects and furniture on his way, and even ignoring that in his eagerness to dance he was banging his own body against the walls. I was scared of him. Not knowing what else to do, I grabbed all the food I had bought and barricaded myself in my bedroom for the night. When I woke up the next day, I smelled rot. It was coming from my office. It's hard to describe my sweet grandmother as a zombified jostling monster, but that's what she had become. Through the night, she had danced until 3 of her limbs fell off. Her remaining legs was black and putrefied, on the edge of being lost too. The overwhelming decay that filled the room made me project her vomit. I closed the door and decided to check on my little brother. But first, just to make sure, I grabbed the old pistol from our late father. It had been 10 years, but I was confident that I still knew how to shoot if necessary. It was. When I went downstairs, I realized that we had company. My brother wasn't as rotten as Grandma. His limbs were still fine, but the skin and flesh from his mouth had fallen off, exposing his whole teeth, creepy and menacing without the cover of the gums. The semi-devoured body of our neighbor Lisa lied on the messy floor. Lisa constantly came to check on us and bring us some of her cooking. I had no choice but to shoot my baby brother, or whatever became of him. The TV and the internet were very inconclusive. The news mentioned that at least 20% of the population decided to dance like mindless puppets until exhaustion, but nothing about rotting in a matter of hours or trying to eat others. However, it was a matter of looking outside the window to realize that they were trying to cover up how awful the situation actually was. On the street, piles and piles of corpses were trampled by those barely alive who still managed to dance until their legs decomposed and didn't allow them to anymore. The smell of rot is unbearable. I want to burn the 3 corpses I have in my house, but I'm afraid to go outside and get bitten. I want to stay safe for now. Maybe I won't even have to worry about it. After a few hours alone, still barricaded in my room, I think I hear a faint, irresistible melody, and my legs are suddenly restless.